Hi everyone, and welcome back. And today I'm going to show you my knot hole. No, seriously, I'm going to show you how I build a post and rail fence out of 14 gauge electrical wire. And this is it right here. 14 gauge electrical wire works really good for a post and rail fence because it's 60 thousandths of an inch, which works out to 5¼ inches in HO scale. So that's just about the perfect size for doing a post and rail fence. And the basis of this is, if you take this as my ground level, I pre-draw my fence on a piece of plywood here, and then I put a line at 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and 3/4 of an inch, and that makes for 5½ feet in HO scale, which is just about perfect for a post and rail fence. And then the distance between the posts here, if you can see it, is 1 3/8 inches, which works out to 10 feet in HO scale, which is pretty near almost every fence out there. The posts are 10 feet apart. So the first thing you'll have to do is your wire is all comes in a roll, or you pick it up from a job site or whatever, is not straight. So the first thing we have to do is straighten that. Now what I do is I have a vise right here, and I have a pair of vice grips on the other end, and I give it about 3 good jerks, and that straightens that wire out really nicely. Now you'll see here, once you use the vise and the vice grips, you've got a bend right in the end, so you just take your rail nips and nip it off. And then I made myself a little jig here, which fits right smack dab in between my post and rail. So what you do is you set it on here, and then you use your rail nips and cut it off to length like so. And for your height, you do it the other way, and you cut yourself off the height that you need right there. I like using rail nips because they cut one edge nice and square, makes things nice and easy to do. And then my top piece, this section of fence that I want to build is 30 scale feet. So I just take my top piece, I've already cut it, and I use some blue tack, and I just tack her on there in place. Make sure it's nice and straight. You get each end. There we are, and you do it in between your post sections there, so that when you do them, you won't be interfering with that. So for the end post, I use one of the rail sections because that will give me a little extra length that I can drill a hole for and mount into the scenery. So I put that there, then I use one of my little rails, put it in like so, another little piece of blue tack, and then I grab a post, which is one of the 3/4 inch long ones, and stick him right there, tack him down, and I'll go ahead and get a couple of these put in place here, and then we'll solder them in. And these posts, you want them fairly straight, but the rails don't have to be perfect, because in all honesty, very seldom do you ever get a post and rail fence that is really nice and straight. The nature of the trees they are a little crooked, so when people are cutting the rails out of them, quite often they tend to be a little crooked too. So anyhow, I use my 3/4 inch ones in the middle. Got all my rails here put in place. And then we will use another long one at the end so that we can mount him as well into the scenery base. Now, if you're doing a really long fence, this is a short fence, but if you're doing a really long one, then there's, I go about every 4 or 5 and put in a post end, so it makes it nice and strong. Now, I like to use, for flux, I like to use this liquid Tix flux. But if you got a preference for using a good paste flux, then go right ahead. But this is what I like to use. I just do that, and I always screw my top back on because I've actually spilled a bottle of this stuff before. And get your soldering iron. Make sure it is nice and hot because you want this to flow as quick as you can. And get her in there. And this electrical wire, I mean, you can go to the hardware store and you can buy it if you want to. But a lot of times at job sites, electricians usually have pieces 2, 3, even a foot long that would work just perfect for what we need it for. And they'd be more than willing to give it to you because they throw it out a lot of times anyway. So, oops, I forgot to flux that. Makes it a little easier when you flux them. It will solder without fluxing, but it makes it a little easier. There we go. That's that one there done. So let's go ahead and take some of these off here. One thing you'll find about blue tack is once you heat it, it gets really gooey. But it works pretty good overall. Now, oh, that one's just a smidgen long, so we just take our nips and we just nip a smidgen off of them. You want these as tight as you can get them because they just solder that much easier. If you have a space, it's really tough going trying to solder them. But there you go. That's that one. There's some of my gooey stuff. Go ahead and that one put in. And that one put in place there. There we go. Now, let's go ahead and give these all a good fluxing. There we are. Oh, I forgot to mention too, I like to use a really fine solder. This is 0.8 millimeter. It just seems to, the finer your solder, the easier it is to flow. There we go. And the better solderer you are, the less filing you have to do, which is what we'll get to in the next step. There we go. So, now all we do is take this thing loose. There you go. There's one side done. So now all we do is we just take her and flip her over. I always like to put it back on my lines. That way you've got a good guide to go by to keep everything straight. And that's bouncing up and down a little bit, so I'll put a little more there. A little more there. Now, let's get some flux on this thing. get a little more flux right here. There we go. And there we go. She soldered up. So the next step on this, now that she's soldered up, you'll see that the solder is a little rough right here. So I use a couple of files on this. Get her filed down. And the better solderer you are, the less filing you have to do. So I'm a mediocre filer, so I've got a little bit of filing to do. And you don't want to get too carried away with this filing. If you start pushing and pulling hard on it, you're liable to break the solder joint, and you really don't want to do that. So just nice and gently file it. There. And then now, for this part here, I got a nice little itty bitty file that I like to use. Gets in there nicely just to finish that off. There we go. And like I say, the better filer you are, or the better solderer you are, the less soldering you have to do, or less filing you have to do. But anyways, there's one side. That's done up pretty good. So I'll go finish this, and then we'll go on to our next step. Oh, there we go. She's all filed down. These are areas right here that you really want to pay attention to, is right in the corners. If you don't get them filed out good, then the fence really does look funky. So my next step is let's paint this thing. And as always, I like to use a flat paint so you don't get the shine and the glare and the gloss. This is my temporary winter paint booth here. It's just too cold to paint them out in the garage this time of year. The paint just doesn't stick. So there we go. So now I got the paint on her. That's a pretty good looking little post and rail fence there. Of course, it's still shiny right now. The paint's got to dry, but there you have it. And this is an area right here where I've already built my post and rail fence. This is my livestock yard for my meat packing plant. And you'll see I've got a couple little cross rails there that are a little crooked, but that's just fine. But overall, it makes for a really realistic looking fence. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. And if you know of anyone else that can benefit from it, then please go ahead and share it. And if you subscribe, you will have notice of all future videos I do. Thank you so much. Bye.